All right. Sound check. Anybody hear me? Is the audio okay? All right. Looks like it's good. And looks like I have three watchers. So that's much better than probably could be expected. So let me just copy this and put it on Twitter. Uh, okay. There we go. All right. So today is Dia de los Muertos. And it is basically just the Spanish language version of All Saints Day, and that's where it comes from. It's the holiday celebrated in Mexico and the U.S. Southwest. Has its origins in Spain. It's not an Aztec holiday. There's lots of pretty skulls here, but they do have various relics of saints, including skulls in Europe and even altars of skulls in Southern Europe. People pray at. So this is not something that is Indio, although you can see with the flowers and the stylization. Certainly now in the 21st century, there's incorporation of stylistic elements that are not entirely European, obviously. All right. But at any rate, yes, it's All Saints Day, but here the Spanish version is Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. And you have Pan de Muertos, Bread of the Dead. People buying a lot. In my last day as a cashier, which was Saturday. I am now working janitorial staff, so this is why this video will be short because I have to be at work tomorrow at 5 a.m. So I have to leave here at no later than 4:30. So if anybody wants to come on and discuss anything with me, I'll send me a message somehow. Bread of the Dead gives you diabetes. Well, if you eat enough of it, perhaps put on the weight. I suppose that's true. So, that's my Twitter. If you want to DM me, and there is my Gmail account. So, yeah, so I'm now working 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. as the morning janitor, and not only am I guaranteed 40 hours a week now, and they're good hours, so they'll always be 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. every day, but Monday and Tuesday. I also have uh, a raise from my previous job. So it's not a huge amount more per hour, 25 cents more per hour, but every little bit counts. So this is all right. So yeah, this is not a a tattoo. This is a batik shirt, though it's not made in Indonesia. It was made in Togo, and I purchased it in Ghana. Oh yes, I have a new Substack out as of yesterday. My brain was working a bit in reaction to Adam II's and the historic conditions that gave rise to the fascist movement in Italy and their march on Rome a little over 100 years ago, taking power by a show of force, convincing the king to appoint Mussolini as prime minister. So my argument, contrary to people like Jason Stanley, who I don't think know anything about fascism, is that the historic and cultural conditions in the United States are such that something like Italian fascism or German National Socialism can't arise here, largely for the same reasons that a mass socialist or communist party never arose in the United States. That the same class dynamics regarding the white working class that prevent something like the S-Day pay in Germany and K-Pay Day later that splits off from developing never could arise in the U.S. So I base a lot of it, my theory on this type of development of particularly Italian fascism on the works of Ernst Nolte, not the ones that got him in trouble in the 1980s, but his earlier, much more popular at the time work in the 1960s. So the Three Faces of Fascism was published in the German version, Fascism, and its epic would be the direct translation into English, I believe in 1963. So even older than me. All right. So I also submitted an article. It was a paper I gave actually in Moscow in 2019 that was never published on Kurds in the Soviet Union, particularly the 1944 deportations from Georgia into Central Asia. So that will be published in English and Czech translation in a journal run out of Prague, and they do have a web version. So both the English and Czech should be up there, but I don't know if I have a whole lot of potential readers in the Czech Republic. I have some in the United States. Why Russia did not accept what? I don't know what that. Okay. All right. Okay. Go here. So I still have a couple academic projects I have deadlines coming up for. One is to finish editing a chapter on the Russian-German diasporas. Mine is on the deportations to Kazakhstan. But it was a conference, Veterans Day last year. I attended through Zoom, and there were people from Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Germany, Austria there, and basically dealing with the Russian-German diasporas throughout the world. Although a lot of it was people who had already left territories of the Russian Empire. So mine was one of the very few talking about them still living in post-Soviet space, although it wasn't about post-Soviet, it was the Soviet era I wrote about. But most of them on the diasporas in the Americas, or those that have quote unquote returned the Aussiedler and Spätaussiedler to Germany. Uh, Most of the Germans in Missouri are either from the states that became part of Germany in 1871 or various parts of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, particularly what becomes Yugoslavia, the Banat region, after the breakup of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the end of World War One. All right. So I have that review still due, and I still not review. I have that chapter to still finish editing, and then I have a review for Russian review. They're usually pretty short, so it shouldn't take too long. Of a book on poetry about the Crimean Tatar, and I finished reading the book, but I always dislike this kind of abstract, removed type of dealing with subjects. Uh, but I said I would do it, so I'm going to write up the Russian review, uh, book review, probably as soon as I get a email from them reminding me that the due date is coming up, and then I'll do it like that day and send it in. All right. Oh, anybody want to join me? Can send me a message and get you on. New job. I've done it full for one full day on Sunday and did it for 5 hours on last Wednesday when I filled in for the afternoon janitor calling in sick. Um, so I have had a total of 13 hours of janitorial work now, and start doing it 40 hours a week. Uh, Big advantage, of course, not a lot of supervision. Get to choose my own break times, and almost no contact with customers. So I get along fine with all of the managers, and haven't had any problems with any of them. They're all uh, much better than most places. So that's a advantage to where I work. That there's been an example set by management to on how they interact with the deltas and epsilon classes. Yeah, I get to move around a lot. It's still going to be take a while to get used to. It's kind of physically exhausting to be constantly moving. Um, but it's okay. It's I like it better than I thought I would. Just 'cause I liked being a cashier more than I thought I would. I think there's just a lot of negative propaganda that isn't true to depict these types of jobs as much worse than they actually are, because there's a disdain by rich people against the working class people. And sometimes it's quite obvious, but I mean, it's not. It's something that I dealt with in my last Substack article. Is that the U.S. Officially denies the existence of class, and so if you are white working class, basically there's nobody representing your interests. I saw that Bolsonaro officially lost to Lulu, but had, don't have a lot of details about the Brazilian election. It's I don't read any Portuguese, and I don't have a lot of historical background on Brazil. Because it was Portuguese and not Spanish. It doesn't fall into the historical framework for things that I study. So, I mean, I had to know a little bit about the Spanish Empire, which included most of South America, but not Brazil, in order to teach New Mexico state history. But Brazil can safely be left out of those readings. And I haven't been to the POW camp in Nebraska. There's a former POW camp for Germans around here. It was a converted CCC camp. And so I guess there was a historical society field trip to it not too long ago, but I was working, so I did not make it. I probably won't be going that long. Ethereum analysis, because I've got to get up to work early tomorrow. But if you want to come on, I suggest you do it as soon as. Send me a message either through Twitter or email as soon as possible, and I'll give you a invitation, and you can discuss whatever subjects you want. Okay, so the big thing in my life has been the, as of Wednesday morning when they called me, the transition from front end checker to maintenance staff, the chief morning janitor, well, the only morning janitor, I guess, well, at least 5 to 1. And that's it. I guess I did submit the article on Kurds in the Soviet Union, which had been delivered as a conference paper, I guess officially a workshop paper in Moscow at the Library of Foreign Languages, and sponsored by some sort of institution in France. They were the ones who paid for my plane ticket from Sulaymaniyah to Moscow and back. All right, so what was it like for average Ukrainian under the USSR? It depends on what year, obviously, and some other factors. If you're talking about the post-Stalin era, Ukrainians did fairly well, although, of course, there is political repression of Ukrainians advocating for greater national autonomy and independence, obviously. But at the same time, the central government has quite a few Ukrainians in it. Depending on how you measure it, both Khrushchev, Brezhnev, and then skipping over Andropov, who was actually, well, I'll get into Andropov because it's kind of interesting in a second, but Chernenko. So three of the Soviet leaders could possibly be classified as Ukrainians in the post-Stalin era, including the longest-lasting one, Brezhnev, who was in power from 1964 until his death in 1982. Now, Andropov Nationalnost was officially Russian, but it is now known that his family were, in previous generations, converts from Judaism to the Russian Orthodox Church. So, if you're one who is obsessed with bloodline, technically Andropov, under those definitions, would be Jewish. All right, I got something from somebody. Let's see here. Okay. Let me get a invite. Wow, yeah. If I don't mess this up. Let's see if this works. Okay. All right, so let me talk about Ukraine. Pepe is partially right. Khrushchev, being Ukrainian, obviously in some sense wanted to transfer the territory, give Ukraine, particularly for revenue purposes, from mostly internal, but also even some external tourism, the biggest industry money-wise in Crimea. But it's also because the central government in Moscow didn't want to have a responsibility for the problems of Crimean Tatars who had been deported in 20th May 1944, mostly to Uzbekistan, and were trying to return to Crimea. They wanted to offload the responsibility from Moscow onto Kiev. And so by transferring the Crimean peninsula over to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, they made it their responsibility. Just as the real block for the Meskhetian Turks ever returning to Meskhetiya Javakhetiya was really the government in Tbilisi more than it was in Moscow. But in the western Ukraine, there had been a guerrilla war, and I have a little video on Ukrainian nationalism. Is that there was a guerrilla war led by the UPA, the military wing of the UNB, in the late 40s and early 50s. It's finally crushed by deporting people, about close to 200,000 of them east to Siberia, so they couldn't provide food and shelter to the guerrillas. So this was the Galician and Volhynian areas that had been under Austrian and then Polish rule before the Second World War. But after the armed opposition is crushed, Most Ukrainian dissidents are coming from further east, Kiev, in particular, which is more in the center of Ukraine than Galicia over by Lviv, which had been, as I said, under Polish rule before the Soviets. And this dissident movement was considerably different than the uh, people who had been fighting under Stepan Bandera, Yaroslav Stetsko, people involved in the organization of Ukrainian nationalists, particularly the faction led by Bandera as opposed to Melnik. So uh, Ukraine, for the most part, the part that had been part of the Soviet Union before World War II, after World War II, are treated fairly well, in large part because Holodomor in 32 and 33, following collectivization and dekulakization in 30 and 31, and then a little later you have the Great Terror, 37, 38, had wiped out uh, all of the people that Stalin viewed as potential oppositionists. So the Soviet government became much more lenient with that part of Ukraine. And of course, the western part of Ukraine only becomes pacified at the very end of Stalin's life. So it's a bit of a different situation around Lviv than it is in areas around Kiev and especially around Kharkiv, which has a much larger Russian-speaking population. So oh yeah, here we go.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I was on my phone on my one of my soccer accounts. So
Soccer counts.
yeah,
It still says Niaz.
no, on this one because I switched to computer. I was
Oh,
on my phone. Hold up, let me get my dog in. He's being an asshole. Hold on. Yeah, what's up? I haven't been on this
not
thing for
much.
like a year.
No, it hadn't been that long. Well, unless you've been doing crypto stuff or whatever you do.
Nah, crypto sucks. I thought everyone knew that.
So yeah, I went over. I've moved from cashier to janitor. I am now the lowest caste according to Brave New World, the epsilon. I even have the black shirt, but it's okay. I think all the people who claim to be alphas are just assholes.
So what was that? What was that? Andy Nowicki didn't he have a like some kind of a book or what was that? Lowest I don't know, sigma, not sigma male, lowest the beta male.
Well, in Brave New World, the beta are
No, no,
the
I'm talking. Andy Nowicki had some kind of a book. I forget.
oh yeah, oh Andy, yeah. I haven't read it, but yes, he tends to be a sigma.
He's a sigma.
That's what he says.
I would have thought he's the opposite.
I don't know. We have to. I don't know what his day job is.
Ah,
No, but I
that's
get the feeling he's probably either According to Brave New World, it'd probably either be a Delta or Epsilon, but I'm an Epsilon and I don't care. So
Well, that's the way to go. Uh, Not a whole lot of stands to live up to, you know. It's like who the hell gives a shit? It's not if people don't help you, they don't help you, right? Or it's like I don't know, getting other people's assurance or something like that is really worth to live for. See, unless either you have ambition and you want to get somewhere, right? Or B, if you don't, if you want to do your own thing, who else gives a shit?
at this point in my life, my goal is to have as little hassle as possible. And for that, a janitor's job is just about perfect. The only time you have to deal with anybody else is when the manager wants something done. But other than that, you know, so you don't have to deal with the public. And as I said, if you pretty much have your own set routine that you do on your own with very little supervision.
Um, I thought, sorry, do you have the possibility of moving up in your job or?
Sure. I'm not sure where I'd move up to, but I mean, the moving up is kind of, well, I want to say, uh, subjective because technically, I mean, this job was given to me as literally as a promotion, even though it was low status. But because it had like double the hours I had, which is what I needed. I'm be, my take home pay is going to almost triple per week.
Hmm. So at least you can live.
Hello?
Oh, do you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and I was just saying, at least you can live. You
Oh,
know.
I thought it was something live like, something. There was um,
Uh, yeah, I would have thought like the living's cost would be a lot lower in your neck of America, right?
well, my rent is not too bad, but food prices go up everywhere, and particularly a lot of things here, food wise, have gone way up because of the increase in petrol prices. It has to be shipped in, so you can't grow certain things in the desert very well.
Petrol prices still in England, or
No, I was for 3 years. I have escaped from that. I have escaped from that prison.
what was in a prison back in the 2000s or not? I mean, it was bad.
No,
I
it was
mean, but
pretty cool actually. But there
yeah,
weren't very many English people even in London at that time.
well, it's an international city.
So I think officially, and so it obviously would seem like it's much more. Officially, 25% of London was non-English when I lived there. But when you're in the center, it seems like a lot more because every time you come in this, people in certain areas, they're obviously not English.
I mean, that's kind of like the setup for any big cities, though, right? You have like the kind of like the people back from like in the burbs, kind of driving in through all the different portions of the city. I mean, I would imagine I've never been there. I've never been outside of Texas in like I don't know 20 years. So uh,
Um, well, I mean, I suppose I mean, it's where you associate with, but because I was at the School of Oriental and African Studies, there were a large number, of course, of non-English people there. Obviously, Asians and Africans, but also quite a few people from continental Europe.
hmm. Well, is that a particular reason? Because I would have thought because continental Europe probably has like although no, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense, right? I mean, but I mean, what got them interested in? Oh man, what the fuck? Yeah, no. So yeah, what was the what were there? I would have thought like because they have good schools in Germany or France.
Um, I don't know. There are very few Oriental institutes. Let me see.
Mm.
If you wanted to do, I mean, it used to be. Uh, so let me see what whether I think the Humboldt University in Berlin is the German kind of equivalent, but I'm not sure if there's much else uh, on the continent of Europe. The Oriental Institute in Chicago. Um, I don't know, but we had quite a few people that were from Germany and Scandinavia. Not too many Frenchmen, but did have some people from the Low Countries.
Maybe because it's the fact that it's England, right? Because it is a former, uh, former worldwide colonial master has like access to all these different kind of
Well, that is
places. Because
true.
it's
Both
it's kind of
both
like same
both
thing
the
that
art,
happened.
yeah, the archives obviously for the colonial period are stored in London. So if you wanted to do anything having to do with India or large parts of Africa, you have to go there to do the research anyways.
Mm. No, it's yeah, that's kind of in a way. I mean, it kind of leads to like so many things that even that happens today, where like you think of like the operations that the English did to blow up Nord Stream 2. It's like one of those things where kind of how American and other people kind of lean on to English. How should I say, like leftover competency and these kind of things. Like having connections into all different parts of the world. Different English people like showing up in like middle of Kazakhstan and
Yeah, so yeah, that's the weird thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Like if you go to Bishkek and you meet like your average European from the continent, um, and you meet your average American, and then you meet your average British guy. The British guy, for some reason, has 10 times as much money, and there's no way to explain it other than the obvious one. It's glowing.
yeah. Well, but they have a lot of like financial kind of connection to all these different places because a lot of a
Well,
lot of
when you look at
international.
the banks in Kyrgyzstan, they're none of them are British. Some of them are Russian, but mostly Turkish, Korean. Uh, Trying to think what else.
I
There's a
would have thought some
Pakistani
Chinese,
bank.
Pakistani.
There's, I don't know if I've seen any Chinese banks though. I think the Chinese money goes through other ways. Um, but obviously, there is because of the local Koryo Soram population and the local Russian population, and also uh, historical reasons. There's Turkey. So I think there's a couple of major Turkish banks. There's one bank that's run by local Koreans, but they have financing from Korean Americans in LA. And there's one. There's also some Russian stuff. I don't know about the Chinese stuff, but there is no. I don't know if there's any British bank. Maybe there's HSBC, but that's really become more of a Chinese bank recently.
Mm. Um, yeah, HSBC is Chinese bank. I thought,
Hong
really?
Kong, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation is based in Shanghai.
Okay, maybe because I thought it was at least in the West, its parent, its parent company was owned by some kind of Western conglomerate. But hey, could be.
I don't know. When I was in London, it was a big British bank, but somehow between then and now, I can't remember when it was. It was shortly after. It was more on the way back. I think all their decision making got moved to Shanghai.
Hmm. Could be. I don't. Is it still? Let's see. Let's
I don't know. I
see.
don't know enough about it, but it's just
Yeah, it's still in England. Yeah, it's could be operating over there, but it probably got broken up. It's it definitely is an Anglo bank. Yeah. Yeah, that would be surprising because with everything that's happening, that they would let a Chinese bank operate
Hong
in the
Kong and
West.
Shanghai Banking Corporation Limited. Um,
Yeah, it's name only. Yeah, I'll be really surprised if they did like let them run around in the West, you know. So
established in Hong Kong and Shanghai in 1865, became incorporated as part of the Chinese company in 2007.
hmm, let's see. Huh, maybe I should trade them.
It's a locally incorporated foreign bank as of 2007. It says
Uh,
HSBC Bank China Company Limited.
well,
So I guess
uh,
it's a weird hybrid.
yeah,
But the
well,
chairman is Peter Wong, and the chief executive officer is Mark Wang, and their office is in Shanghai.
yeah, but I mean it's Shanghai, you know. I mean like all these Anglo-Chinese types, you know, still gonna be like once.
Well, I
I
don't
guess like
know.
how do they?
The prime minister of Great Britain is an Indian. Uh, I don't. I mean, the empire has become reversed. It's gone like bio-Leninist back to the old ideas of colonizatio. You throw the empire inside out and let the colonies run the metropole.
No, no. I mean, I don't think it's a violence at all, right? I mean, the upper class is still the upper class. It's a detachment from it's detaching from basically the the hoi polloi, like the average Anglo. I mean, that's really it. I mean, there's something like I don't know, like back in 2019, 2018, we were talking about when I was I used to show up. So I mean, it's the same similar thing that you see because it's kind of funny because you had your like little skirmish with all the people from England. But like I was telling you, like I do think there's a lot to it that for the Anglos that all of a sudden they wake up, right, and then the queen dies, and who's actually loved by the rest of the world. But for some reason, a lot of people in England don't like her. And then you
Those
have
people are usually
Packies.
Irish, though. But
Yeah, but I mean, still, I mean, there's like the token outsiders, token brown ones that will talk. But then you have like Pakis versus Indians in the middle of England, right? And then all this Ukraine stuff happens, and it's clear that England is just like America's bitch. So it's like it's like all of a sudden they get all of a sudden they realize that they're just like everyone else, just a colony, So I mean, I mean, I think that's kind of like one of the reason, like uh, that's you can see that a lot of in other Europeans too. But I think in the case of England, it's harder for them to
yeah, but
take
it's
that
not because I
because
mean,
they have a quote unquote special relationship. All this time they were like the second brother to this Anglo, world empire. All of a sudden they realize, oh shit, they're just like everyone else.
what I think is something because I mean, and this is particularly some with regard to, I suppose, the Middle East. That you had this British Empire dominating the world for about 200 years. It gets to the Middle East a bit late, but they weren't particularly loved in places like Iraq. Things like dropping poison gas on Kurdish
Hmm.
tribesmen didn't make them very popular. Whereas Germany never had any colonies in the Middle East and had few in Africa. And there was a great tour by Kaiser Wilhelm II of the Levant. He goes to Beirut and
I
Haifa
loved
and
him.
Damascus and Istanbul, and there's monuments in all these cities to where he was. I've seen the one in Beirut and I've seen the one in Istanbul. So the continental Europeans, had a much better relationship historically to non-Europeans. I mean, the Germans and Hungarians, actually, if anything, their Orientalists were pro-Arab against the British and French.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing is that ironically, it's the more, let's say, continental right-wing types that have more in common and more, that they're more friendly terms with the rest of the world. What the Anglos would consider to be, let's say, the non-white world or non-whatever. It's that's I mean, that's something which would be surprising to pretty much both the left and the right to think about or to even contemplate. But what I was when I was referring to like the way that some people in I don't know, hard right or whatever in England were reacting to the Queen dying, is that one of the funny thing is that most people in the rest of the world actually love the Queen. Like every fucking like women in the Commonwealth, like they love the
Well,
fucking
that's true. I
president.
mean, there's those
It's
famous
like
pictures in Ghana. Ghana got its independence on 6th of March 1957, and there's a big all-night party, and the Queen was there dancing with the new Prime Minister and President new President. He'd been Prime Minister already when it was under autonomous home rule, I guess, but they get full independence in 57. So there's all these pictures of President Nkrumah dancing with Queen Elizabeth II on 6th of March 1957, and kind of displayed everywhere in Ghana and Ghanaian websites. So I mean, uh, as much as there's not that much in Ghana, but there's some, certainly more than in the United States, resentment of British previous rule there. But it's not doesn't extend to the monarchy.
yeah, yeah. That is actually kind of interesting aspect of that was that when it comes to this anti-Anglo, anti-English like sentimentality. Uh, sorry, my mother cooked. It was really hot, so I don't know. I don't know if you heard me burping or whatever, but so yeah. So what's kind of interesting is because like the rest of the world actually kind of makes the distinction because um, you have a lot of the upper caste types that were that were like in cahoots with the colonial masters, right? But
Yeah, the
then
chiefs.
yeah, yeah, and the thing is that to an extent, like a lot of the old chiefs were sidelined or they were like reincorporated, right? And so you
Yeah, well,
have
they had to be because they had to have some sort of unified leadership, right?
yes,
So I mean, even I mean, this is why Pan Africanism comes about in part, is because even with the conglomeration of numerous African nations into larger states, they're still small states. So Ghana has like 100 what we would call nations, that is separate ethnic, cultural groups or something, right? So there had to be a suppression of their political leaders to have one national leader under Nkrumah.
yeah, yeah. So what's kind of funny, not funny. I mean, what's very interesting is that at the same time though, there is this kind of like um like love hate relationship, right, with the when it comes to some of these countries is because many times like they were getting that relevance, right, for the fact that they were kind of like the ruling class in lieu of like the crown, right, and they were just doing their bidding. And so it's also kind of interesting is that once that England left, the same kind of class of people was still there, and they're just, even when they're mapped off like anti-English whatever, it's essential they're just all Anglophones. So
Well, that's true.
Anglophiles.
That's what happened with Nehru. Nehru basically decided he would be the British Prime Minister in India. So, but I mean, his mannerisms and his training, and even in part, I think his worldview was very British. especially if you were to compare them to, say, uh, your average rural Indian or even urban Indian at the time.
Yeah, I mean, Nehru's a weird case. Well, it's not a weird case because you can see that the whole thing
It's a
among like,
typical case, though.
yeah, it's a typical case.
This
Yeah.
is kind of like the empire recreates its elite in the colonies, and then they decide, well, they wanted to be actual have political control of their home country. So it kind of backfires. They train their own replacements in the colonies.
Yeah, and that's the weird aspect is that there's so many different like threads that are playing, right?
But
Okay, and
how would
that's
it be any different?
well, if
I mean, if you look at it, I mean, maybe they didn't have the foresight, but looking back on it, it seems almost inevitable. If you're going to reproduce your ruling class in the colonies, of course they're going to want to rule, and not just rule on your behalf. They're going to want to be the top dogs as soon as possible.
yeah, but I mean that was the plan. That wasn't exactly like a mistake, right?
The
The
plan
thing
was
is
to
that
lose the empire. Well, that's a bad plan if you're an imperialist.
no, but the thing is that they were the replacement upper class, right? To take care of the locals. The plan was essentially, I mean, you can see the way that developed since like mid 18 like after 1857 was the creation of kind of like this civil administrative class among the Indians, right? Because the empire started to kind of consolidate everywhere. Like the East India Company kind of went out of
Well, it got
favor or whatever.
nationalized. The
Correct,
British
correct, and
government took it over.
yeah, yeah, and essentially what started to happen is they started to streamline them into like a administrative unit, and that was a good thing for some people, bad thing for some other people, right? So, but it's not. It was by design in the sense that the creation of this kind of like a anglicized upper class, right?
Right.
That it
The official term in the literature is the co-option of local elites.
Yes. So that created in itself, though, you're right in the sense that it created a sense of like they want to rule, right? But at the same time, by having that, that was a unintended, consequences or unforeseen consequence. But though, at the same time, though, by them like anglicizing them, essentially they kind of do the bidding for the empire without doing it. Like they want to be part of the
Yeah,
empire, you
yeah,
know?
well, Lord Lugard's indirect rule said that the rule that is least direct is the best because it expends the fewest resources.
Yes, and so here's the thing though, like when it got broken up and like post World War II, and that's kind of one of the weird things. Like like I was trawling through before I got kicked out of Twitter, like all those all the people talking about like how they would have been able to hold India. It's like or like the empire post World War II. It's like if America wasn't in the way or something, it's like crack talk. Basically, it's by that time it's like you know unlikely by my
Yeah, well, I mean,
know. So
the consensus. Well, I don't know if it's consensus. My understanding is that you already starting with the Sepoy Mutiny start to have resistance by people trained as part of this new elite against the British. So we're already in the 19th century seeing uh, the golem turn against its master, as it were. And then World War One just bleeds Britain dry. So their ability to send a lot of men or even money resources to maintain the colonies becomes greatly reduced from what it was. And then, of course, World War II is the final straw, both in terms of bleeding what's left of the British, but also giving a final strong incentive to the indigenous population to get rid of the British once and for all, because you have things like the famine in Bengal. There's it's on a very small scale, but there's a refusal to pay the bonuses for and pensions for Ghanaian soldiers who fought in Burma against the Japanese, and they have a protest. and the British killed three of the veterans. And so this kind of pushes the Ghanaian independence movement into uh, existence, really. So you have all these types of things going on through lots of the colonies that people just getting tired of the British. And the British are now at the weakest point they've ever been because they wasted all their resources fighting against the Germans.
Yeah, and so the point that I was saying is that yeah, losing the empire, what's going to happen anyway. But the way that they went about it, and this is where people, kind of give how should I say, a lot of third worldist types will say how the English were like especially, I don't know, conspiratorial, something like that, where they would, be able to get one party, against the other, right? But this is kind of like as old as time. I mean, this is not like anything new in diplomacy. But what happened, ironically, is that due to them being so anglicized, that they were okay with the way that the empires were dissolved. So in the case of like in India, right? Pakistan, India being broken up into what it is, it's like it is so ahistorical, like so retarded. Sorry, Susan.
That's okay.
Apologize. Um,
I
or like,
understand what you mean, but
it's not just the fact that the way it happened is that
it might have been
essentially.
inevitable because Jinnah had enough people to make sure that he could break away uh, the Muslim parts or part of
Yes.
the Muslim parts. Obviously, a lot of Muslims stayed in India, actually more than and went to Pakistan, but he managed to break off, the part by the Indus River.
Well, the whole situation with that, I mean, what I'm trying to kind of get at is that that's an example where um that's an example where the outcome after the breakup wasn't as, let's say, good for the nations that in these colonies, right? And where the Anglos still had quite a bit of if influence, right, without actually being there, right? To that extent where now you have Rishi Sunak who wants to be, wants to play act as English, right? Because in a way it's like affirmation of Rishi Sunak's everything, because he's basically a coconut, like uh, just like Jinnah or like Nehru.
Nehru.
These guys are just all coconuts, right? So that's what I was kind of trying to get at. This kind of you know co-
That's gonna be the case in any of these colonies. As I said, the elite that were in control on the ground
Mhm.
were the ones that were created in the image of the British, and then they turned against them.
Yeah, but the turning against them essentially though did not. It wasn't the worst outcome for the empire. That's because the empire would
Oh,
have been
oh,
able to
yeah, of
hold.
course not. Of course not. Obviously, many of the countries, particularly in Africa, but also India itself, much less so Pakistan, maintained good relations with the British in the time after formal independence.
Mm. Um, yeah, and so basically that's kind of like where you see like this kind of elite class that kind of gets formed, right? And it's kind of like you have a ready-made elite that as much as like what you're saying, it's a violinist, it's not really as violinist as you would think. These people are, I think that people like throw these words around like violinist, like without the people at that level are not true violinists yet, right? There's an effect on them, but that
Well, no,
effect
but
has.
they're Leninist in the sense of the Korenizatsiya in the 1920s, where there is a promotion and creation of. I mean, the Soviets basically took Lord Lugard's indirect rule and turned it up to 11 in
Mhm.
Korenizatsiya. So you have this creation of the Soviet national elites and the open promotion of Soviet versions of their culture, particularly in Central Asia and the Caucasus. But there's also a big Ukrainianization campaign as well.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I mean that my main, yeah, what I was kind of going at is the extent to which this kind of like it's all ironic. Well, all these kind of historical kind of cycles that go in these ebbs and flows, and it's like holy shit, this is kind of ironic, but everything is kind of like slightly ironic in that sense. But yeah, I mean, it is a form of colonization, but how would you? Because like, okay, so is it really though? Like in the case of England, because you have the locals, they are what they are, right? You have outsiders, and they're also kind of what they are. I mean, I don't think that they have the ability to like make them their own, indigenize them. If they were to be indigenized, that they'll be local Anglos. Like, I don't think that's possible. All that's going to happen is they're just going to have like little blocks, right? And the upper class is what it is. I mean, they're just Anglo, they're part of the Anglo, um, Anglo Atlanticist upper class types, right? And I'm not, I'm not too sure that kind of a arrangement really fits what's happening in England necessarily, though,
All
right?
right, so let me get this straight. So the British in colonialism recreate uh, indigenous versions of their own elite class out of the elite classes that the places they are conquering and put them in rule. They then revolt to throw the British out, but they send their children or whatever grandchildren to go to Great Britain, where they become part of the British elite in Great Britain. So isn't this really just is it following? So it really is the Gollum taking over Dr. Frankenstein's castle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is it really that the whole thing though is that they're still they're part of this overall, they're recruiting from like their own internal networks, right? So they're not getting some random like Pajit out of like
No, I'm not saying it's random. I'm saying it's from their international post-colonial network.
yeah, yeah, and that's the thing is that it's all of a sudden, a lot of people who thought they were like they were like the owners of
So in that sense, did the empire ever really die, or maybe it just got morphed into the fact that uh, the empire is still there, but now the Indian elite or African elites have cut themselves in on a greater share of the imperial power than they had before.
I don't think an empire really died in the sense that the English empire, as we have known it, is definitely dead. I just think that they have been kind of incorporated as a junior partner into Anglo, essentially American, gay Atlanticist, empire. And because obviously for this, it's an easy, it's like a path of least resistance thing where America is England's kid, for lack of a, I don't know how else to say it, but like it's derived from England, and this makes total sense. And the way that it happened in a post World War II, environment, like if you think of FDR and the expansion of American power, like post World War II, um, it kind of piggybacked England for for a lot of their like initial um, like their expertise in many different areas, right? And that was what England had to give. And if you think from England's perspective, like they're going to be second-rate power, or maybe not even have any kind of influence in the world, which is a big slap in the face for, let's say, if you were upper class in England, like
And
some
so they're
Lord
going to go.
Salisbury.
They're going to be like Spain. It went from ruling
Yeah,
the
right.
15th and 16th century. It ruled everything, and now it's just
Yeah, exactly. So
a country on the edge of Europe. It's not even the
yeah,
richest
exactly.
country in Europe. It's just kind of a middle income country in Europe, sitting at the with very little geopolitical influence anywhere.
In a way, it's kind of like when you think of the 70s or 60s, right? Or 70s, really, before like Thatcher came around. This idea that England is kind of slowly, because the economy was getting suffocated, right? So it's like England is basically like a non-influential entity, right? And so in a post World War II environment where they traded in their eventual like downgrade, right? into like, okay, basically they're going to be America's point man in everything. And this is kind of funny. It's like it plays out in every aspect like of geopolitics. If you think of like, let's say, like why is Russia always, like all the time you have like the Anglos are like English are always anti-Russian all the time, right? In the Cold War, this happened too. Like a lot of black ops, right? Like let's say like espionage using submarines deep inside of Soviet waters. They were all done by the English,
Well,
right?
sometimes the English failed and we had to bail them out, like
Yes,
Operation Ajax in Iran in 1953, because the Iranians took over the British embassy before the British could do shit.
yes. However, though, you can see the trend, and the trend was always that it was like the plausible deniability. For example, like all the so if Cold War, like big thing about. I mean, I don't want to go deep dive into like fucking military shit, and might be like boring for a lot of people, but um, in what happened with the coming online of like submarines or nuclear submarines is that you had one of the more like destructive, one of the most possible, the most destructive way of killing people have ever been invented, which is to say that basically these subs can fly around and stay, submerged, right? And let's say you fight over land, but these things are around and there's nobody to counter them. So what happened is that to spy on them and to like literally like steal these subs, like their subsystems and their sonars, what the Americans used to do is get the English to do it because the English are superior submariners, right? And they have really good boats.
Well, the
So
Germans, the Germans had those great guys on the Unterseebooten.
yeah, but that was in World War II. I'm talking about like post World War II. I
Oh, so
mean,
we killed off every single German that was a man, and now we can't use them.
no,
That's
I mean no,
so
they used
sad.
them. They were just on the folder gap. but no, but the Germans also have like really good subs, but they're not, their subs don't go worldwide because they're not nuclear subs because they don't need them to be nuclear because it's a coastal navy. They're not really a power projection navy. So in terms of NATO, their job was to hold basically the Jutland area, like not to let the Soviet Navy moved beyond it. So what was the whole Cold War was interesting is anytime you have like where let's say escalation can really happen real fast, right? The English will be basically be given that kind of the role, right? And so what will happen is that, oh, the English did it, right? So for example, like you have these English submarines that would steal like Soviet submarine their sonars, um, and so and the rationale essentially was that like if they get caught, what's going to happen? Like, versus if it was American sub, and that's like World War III shit, right? The same thing you see with like Nord Stream. Like the English did it is because the escalation is gonna be little old England did it, right? So or you can see the same thing in like Trump. The PIS dossier. All these things were done by MI6, right? Like understand like this was really CIA. They're just like outsourced it that we can say, oh yeah, it's not us. We don't like we're not partisan. We're not gonna kill our own politician. It's the English, or it'll be someone else. You know what I mean? So I don't know why I'm talking about this or why I'm on this tangent, but I think oh yeah,
Yeah,
it was
because
due. Yeah, it
go
was due
ahead.
to yeah, it was due to like the role of England post World War II, right? So and the way it developed and why that kind of happened is it's in the big picture it made a lot of sense for England. The way that everything, even losing the empire, didn't happen in a way which was detrimental to the English, foreign policy. And I think what's interesting is that post Cold War is when like that relationship became like more of a normal um, empire relationship. Like you have the master and the slave, right? So the master America and England is getting more and more treated like a normal colony, right? And like with the with the no gas, like people's being in such inconvenience, the economy almost blowing up overnight, all this kind of stuff, right? It's like, well, I mean that, they're not even like that favored, second class power anymore to America. You know what I mean? So I mean, there's structural reasons for a lot of people to get pissed off. Essentially, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, how was Day of the Dead in Texas?
David Dent, I don't know. It's pretty good. Um,
Last night I was outside my apartment with a bag of chocolate bars, and I had dinner and was reading a book and waiting for any trick or treaters. And just like last year, I got exactly zero.
hmm, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's strange. Is it because like, although I mean, really huge with Mexicans. I mean, I live in a kind of a third of my neighbors are Mexican, so kids are always all over the place, and my dog barks, so I have to like, uh, basically put my dog in the backyard. And yeah, it's strange. I would have thought like it's really huge with the. You have a lot of kids around. 'Cause, I mean, you like close to the
Yeah.
school, huh? They're all
But
druggy.
evidently they don't like do the trick or treating in my particular area. They're like certain areas that are zoned for it, I guess. I mean, not officially, but in reality. And none of those areas include apartment complexes. They're all single family dwellings,
Hmm.
or sometimes there'll be events like the Baptist church had a big, huge event for Halloween. So, but yeah, so nobody comes trick or treating to my abode in the last 2 years.
I don't think that in my in my cousin in my cousin's place, I don't see them do a lot of trick or treating. For whatever reason, I see in my place over here that my cousin lives in a, let's say, a little bit more, well, not a little bit more, quite a bit more upper class. Um, Whereas I live more of a working class type of place, right? And I don't know. I mean, there's people all around. I mean, there was kids going off all the way, and I had like what a Walgreens at the last second bought me like all these freaking candies, and I'm gonna be eating those candies. But yeah, it's that's strange. And I've seen that though, like Mexicans are into this shit. Like Mexicans really into like trick or treating. You know, that is strange. It's Is it local? I wonder. Like New Mexico sounds like a very the way you describe, the way you live there sounds a little different than Texas.
A little bit, but it doesn't look very much different than West Texas out here in East New Mexico. It's the same basic flat landscape.
That may be why, because people I know from West Texas are also kind of like that. Kind of, how should I say? Not kind of like more,
I mean, one
they just
the Texas town that is most similar to New Mexico is Lubbock.
Lubbock out of the. I used to work with the one of the guys I used to work with was from West Texas. It's like totally fatalistic dude type of that kind of a character. That kind of I think of when I think of West Texas, I think of that kind of archetype. Like of, dude just drinks or like he goes around. He's a horny dude, so he goes around. Like start to pick up chicks like in after work. Like when we like do after work, get-togethers, all this kind of shit. So um, anyway. But no, how's outside of that? I mean, I know that um, and outside of getting your job stuff, like what's your long-term plans?
I don't have a long term plan. I have short term plans. I'm working on trying to get some medium term plans.
Hmm. What is that? What's your goals?
Uh, uh,
Just a
pretty
job
much-
or like uh, more security.
Yeah, I mean, whatever improvements I can make. So, but in the last week, I've had major forward movement. So
Mm.
I'm doing pretty well compared to where I was.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna be doing uh some of my own I don't want to say here some of my own things, and yeah, I told you that if you want me to do some of your marketing and things, once I start doing it, more than happy to help you out, market some of your shit, so if you want me to.
Yeah, so I can sell one copy of each book to everybody in Texas. I'll be fine.
Well, not copying this of each book. I mean, hell, like getting a profile out, kind of as a writer or whatever you want to do. So besides just
Well,
look,
a lot of writers were
this
janitors. I think Carver was a hospital janitor in Sacramento before uh, for a while.
Carver.
Yeah, let's look him up. Famous short story writer, fairly modern. Raymond Carver.
I thought it was like William Carver.
Okay.
What was
Raymond
the
Carver, American short story writer and poet. Contributed to the revitalization of the American short story in the 1980s. So, let's see. Born in 38, died in 88. Oh my God, he only lived 50 years. I'm already 52.
That's all right. You've lived a pretty good life, to be honest with you. I mean, you all across the world, wrote books. Uh, you know, you still like I don't know. I mean, there's not a whole lot. It's a lot of action.
Yeah, he did live in Sacramento. He was a night custodian at Mercy Hospital, which is right across from where my grandmother used to live. Oh, my grandfather too. They're both dead now, but and the house doesn't look at anything like it did when they were alive. Whoever they sold it to have destroyed the old architecture. But
Mm. Uh, yeah. I don't know, man. I'm thinking like, what else? It's been a lot of stuff since I've been here, right? When was the last time I was here?
quite a while ago.
Year, yeah. It's like there's an exhaustion of like things happening in a week, like that's let in quote, right? Like things happen in a week that used to happen in a year or something, whatever, right? But yeah, I'm trying to think like outside of that, like I read some of your pieces.
Yeah, how'd you think?
That's that's good. I mean, I'm pretty much like, I mean, they're most of I mean, obviously, I mean it's top quality, but I thought the whole idea of basically like ethnogenesis type, or like not the genesis, like the potentiality of any kind of counter right in America would be different, right? That in itself has happened already. It's really just a beacon and brigade. Like if you think of the '90s, right? Essential, that is really it. That's like the core of any kind of radical right that will happen in the American context. Or you can say the same thing about, let's say, the America First movement, right? The original one. It's like a very close copy.
Yeah, but they're very different than what it grew up out of Italy or Germany in the 20s and 30s. So, I mean, one thing is the American right doesn't want to have anything to do with empire, whereas the Italians were trying to recreate some sort of imperial presence by conquering the last non-colony in East Africa. And then the Germans, of course, had the idea of Lebensraum and making Ukraine their Africa.
Yeah, yeah, but the thing with America is that it is so isolated, right? America doesn't really need the rest of the world. and America's identity isn't really with the rest of the world. So, in other words, that it makes sense for America to be isolated and to be isolationist. So,
Right, but that's very different than the the fascist and the National Socialist. They
yeah,
weren't isolationist. They were expansionist.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the. I mean, it goes into 10,000 different like areas that the conversation can go, because like that's one of the things that people that happens where people like idealize like um the mid-century, like those kind of people, right? So and where like each places, each people have their own context, and so what ends up happening is that those contexts kind of go out the window, and what people do is they kind of latch onto what's like popular or what's in the zeitgeist. And so what I mean by that is like when you think of it from like what could be a counter right in America, it has to be contextualized for America. But that is like where this kind of fascination with what happened in
Well, I think
mid-century
I
over there.
think my theory that the same reason we didn't have socialist and communist movements is the same reason we can't have a fascist movement. There isn't this radical, mobilized, working and lower middle class element that's politicized ever in the U.S. The whole issue of class is ignored at best, or we have kind of a, I guess the term used normally is oligarchic, but I like the German mid-century German term plutocratic better.
Yeah. Well, what I was getting at is essentially that the way that if you look at, okay, so when people think of kind of a kind of a right reaction, right, to uh, global home or whatever, any kind of like counter right or dissident right that will
Well,
that will kind of.
it's not gonna be from guys working in these little email. It's not gonna be like from people working email jobs and in little tiny cubicles.
It won't.
And that wasn't the case either in Europe either. It's going to be the guys that can put some physical muscle on the street. Now, that's not me, but there are obviously the types of people like that in the U.S., but they've never been politicized in any direction. So it makes it very different than where you just had people already politicized against the system. They just moved from the left to the right in Italy and Germany.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is that the fascination they have with mid-century Germans or whatnot, right? I think it's kind of like going nowhere. Is because of that. Like they're kind of trying to emulate something that it doesn't really fit, the time or the place, right? And so in many ways trying to kind of emulate them kind of leads America into kind of like this neocon or Straussian type of situation where you can excuse like any kind of overseas action, right? Make an empire. Um, and so that's kind of like what I was gonna say is that, so in other words, that this whole fascination with a certain person there, or the counter movements in Europe, in general, then doesn't mesh with America or America's interest or what should be its guiding principles, right? There's no need for America to have empires or to even care about other people, to be honest. So um, and neither is the people that they're working with. America is a conglomeration of many different peoples. You're not working with a cohesive, a single group that can trace itself like literally 5,000 years ago, right? So
True,
it,
true.
it's
Our
it's a
ethnogenesis is not complete.
yeah, yeah. And so basically the fascination with these, let's just say, I don't want to say foreign, but for outside,
Foreign is fine.
okay, well, I mean, external.
European.
yeah, European kind of a solution, or those kind of solution as America's solution is basically kind of a misdirection, right?
Yeah, of course,
Or
because I mean, not only are the conditions for it not there to put it in, but I mean, even look at the things that the Italian fascists and German National Socialists were concerned about. They're not things that concern anybody in America, right? So Lebensraum, that's just not an issue. Uh, are Slavs Untermenschen? Well, no, nobody cares about that. That's like what type of question is that in 21st century America? Or what's another one? Oh, Freemasons, right? So
yeah,
these are like,
Freemasons.
right? You know, we're going to go after the Shriners. They're the enemy. Right? um,
I love those.
so I mean, it's obviously uh, it's not any type of model, but it's also, I mean, you see on Twitter just endless claims that there's fascist movements in America, and I'm looking around, and yeah, I do wear a black shirt, but that's because I'm required to by my anti-fascist corporation because they're plutocratic.
Yeah, I mean, it, well, it's not even like those are basically like dog whistles, right? It's to get the whole system um, to hound down any kind of potential kind of dissidents coming about, right? So from them to form anything real. But I'm saying that even from the perspective of like so many of quote unquote dissidents out there that would buy into European models, essentially, right? And and uh, and yeah, but that's kind of like was my main, um, I guess, trajectory of critique there,
Well,
because
yeah, obviously because um, not only the geographical and cultural differences, but also the historical and chronological differences. I mean, the idea that somehow conditions in the U.S. are the same as the immediate post World War One in Italy and Germany is quite silly.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so thus basically a lot of their assessment and solution, in other words, is, I think, then misplaced. Like it's not like talking about a certain event, certain thing happened 10,000 times over just means that you're just stuck there and you can't move forward. Like you're not, you're not even moving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I obviously. I mean, right, and obviously, the point also is that uh, it it is more productive to improve your own strength and ability to resist negative influence from other groups than just simply blame other groups for your plight.
Yeah. Well, also, if you from like from a narrative perspective, it's like the whole thing is the establishment, the system, machine, whatever. The reason why everything is like, oh, you are uh, a Nazi or whatever the fuck, right? So you are this, you are that. Okay, so those are again just words to hem people down. It's kind of like um, almost like a marker, like, okay, this guy, we need to attack him, right? We need to double up and attack him, and crush him before anything happens. This is just a way to signal for the whole system to keep people in check that way. But what happens then is that these people who then, on the other side, they look at it and say, and essentially, like, this is your 4chan types, or the guys on like um, Twitter, right? Or these guys who kind of signal the extremeness by basically like repeating the same thing, except the fact that they're on, they're like pro, or let's say they're quasi pro, a certain guy or certain movement in England, Germany, or whatever, right? And so that's the problem, is that then it's like they always get stuck on that, and so they can never really overcome or like step over those events, right? It's like we don't live in 2022 with the current problems that we have. the solution to that is what happened in 1940 something something. Like it doesn't stay in the sense of like analyzing the situation and what happened. It's basically the same thing over and over again, uh, and and not looking at, let's say, um, you understand, it's a stumbling block. It's a stumbling for everyone, like including right winger types, right, or dissident types, or people who want to change because they can't move forward or past it because they just want to signal, like because the system's signaling one way, they just signal the other way about the same event and never move forward. So and I think that's basically
Right, well,
essentially
I
90
mean,
percent of dissident sphere is that.
well, yeah, but it's. I mean, it's there. As I said, in Germany and Italy, you already had the working masses mobilized. They were just mobilized on the other side. But in the U.S., it's something quite different. So uh, there is. I don't even know if it's because what you have is basically the so-called establishment, right? The Con Inc. Republicans. They're basically uh, your elite capitalist, uh, and then you have the Democrats are basically the same thing, but with um, co-option of the non-whites, particularly Jews and blacks. So if you're a white working class person, you've got nobody supporting you.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas in Europe, right, the communist and the fascist in Italy and the German National Socialists were fighting fiercely for loyalty of the working class. They were trying to get them over, and there are all kinds of pro-working class policies by the extreme right wing in Europe that you would never see by any party in the U.S. So, for instance, my favorite one is Kraft Dirk Freude, Strength to Joy, which was a state-run travel agency, very similar to what the Soviets had under Inter, that the Germans ran for working class people. That is, as part of your union negotiated collective bargaining agreement, you get this all-inclusive paid trip for 2 weeks. On a ship or a cruise ship or whatever. You go down to the Schwarzwald, right? So you had this state organization by a party organization by the National Socialist for working class recreation.
mm. Well, the problem with that is in many ways, like in America, there's no concept of that, right? Because
Right. It doesn't.
yeah,
The idea that there even is class is ignored most of the time.
well, I mean, not yeah, and
The whole
it,
thing in the U.S. is that the poor people choose to be poor, therefore it's not a interest group in the same sense that, for instance, black people or Jews or any of the groups that have power are.
yeah. I mean, to a large extent, I mean, it is the thing is that those people that are already were part of America, right? Theoretically, from that perspective, is that they would own the land, and essentially that kind of a culture, would not breed this kind of a class kind of consciousness, theoretically, because if everyone's owning their own, like, skills and own land. And the problem with that is essentially ends up being that if the left is able to like import people who doesn't own anything, automatically, obvious. I mean, it's pretty obvious that they become a client base, right? So, I mean, this is not exactly rocket science, but
Right, but
yeah,
what you have in the rise of fascism and national socialism is the right reaction saying we're going to take a bunch of these working class people and lower middle class people and former middle class people that have become poor away from the left and move them on the right.
mm.
And
It's
that
kind of
that is that is impossible in the U.S. So that's why you can't have fascism here. You're not going to have a right wing party that is able to mobilize the white working class because they haven't already been mobilized and radicalized by the left, as what happened in Europe.
One thing though, I mean, you there in some ways though, there's not a this concept of like, let's say, workers' rights as it happened in like stemming from like the 19th century kind of European
Correct, which is
social
why,
problem, social
which means
situation.
that we can have, which is why there's no socialist or communist movements with large numbers of born Americans in them, or I guess Anglo-German, whatever. But I mean, if you look at the figures, are mostly immigrants and children of immigrants, and over half of them are Jewish in the Communist Party in the U.S. Right? Whereas the German Communist Party, with lots of Jews in the leadership, but there's also lots of actual Germans in the rank and file, and a lot of them become the kind of Rindersteak, the beefsteak Nazis. They move over to the Sturmabteilung.
Hmm. What there is something parallel though. Like I mean, it's not going to end up looking the same. But if you think of say like the workers' union, God damn it, I forget the total name for it. Basically, Cesar Chavez, right? Um, it's something like that, where essentially it's
You're
not.
talking about the well, Cesar Chavez was the head of the United Farm Workers, which was just a labor union. Wasn't an area that had been unionized before, uh, and of course, a lot of the positions taken by the UFW, for instance, no importing of illegal immigrants to work in farm labor, are completely dismissed now because it didn't bring profit to the farmers.
Yeah, well, I mean, themselves they were like long-term Californians, though, right? So it's not like.
No, none of them had moved from other states. Some of them were second uh, generation Americans whose parents had immigrated from Mexico. They were almost all uh, U.S. citizens or legal long-term residents, the green card holders, which is, but some of them, a lot of them were born in the U.S. of immigrants that came in from Mexico. That
Yeah.
was a large part of it. So they were the second generation. But what the farm owners would do is bring people in illegally from Mexico, so they didn't have to pay them things like workman's comp and minimum wage to compete with them.
Well, but that's the thing, though. It used to happen a lot. Like, I mean, there were Mexicans used to kind of like cross back and forth all the time. Like, I mean, that's the one of the weird thing is that
They still do. They
when
still go back and
well,
forth.
well, I mean, like even like from a census perspective, they would not like count they would count them or not count them, but the thing is that like they will stay right half the year, then go back, and
It still
they didn't even
happens.
count them. Well, I mean, back then, I mean, they didn't even have like border guards or whatever, right? So it's like people just showed up. So shit like was like, I mean, the same thing happened, used to happen like, because I know a lot of those like Tejano types, like back from work. Um, like not a lot. I knew some guys, but cause that kind of a background, right? People who kind of like off the border, but not really American, or I mean, they can be both side. But
No,
the group,
people who cross over for various lengths of time. I mean, I know a number of people that do that here. That were born and raised in Chihuahua, and then they move here and work for a while, and then go back to Chihuahua, depending on. Well, it depends on economics. I mean, they're not. Their motivation is purely economic in this case of why they are moving from place to place. But this is pretty common, I think, in the border states. So for Chihuahua and New Mexico and Sonora and Arizona, people will go back to Mexico if the economic situation get bad in the U.S.
yeah. Well, what I was thinking when I was bringing up like the farm workers is that you have something actually something similar, even when it comes to um how should I say, there's that mentality still there though. The taking care. It's kind of like a workers' right type of mindset. If not explicitly,
But
having the
I'm
burdens
not
for
sure
it,
if you
right?
remember because I was around. I was in college during the Great Boycott, which was the
Mm,
last big boycott United Food Workers. At that time, United Food Work, not United, United Farm Workers. United Farm Workers was considered, to be a left wing
yes,
issue. People
yes,
support for this was a left wing position. So United Farm Workers got support. Our cafeteria at the college, which was prohibited by the administration from unionizing at that time. They have since unionized. Supported the UFW union boycott against grapes. All right, but now I know there's a holiday in California native, but certain things like one of Cesar Chavez, of course, main positions because it undercut the wages so much was against bringing in illegal aliens to work on the farms, right? Now it's like been completely buried, right? So, but there were lots of people on the left who said, "No, you're right, there shouldn't be bringing in, kind of a semi-slave class that has no legal protection to undermine the wages and conditions of existing workers in the United States. Whereas now, if you said no, we shouldn't let them in because it would undermine the existing wages and conditions of people already legally in the United States. The left freaks out that you're some sort of xenophobic fascist and national socialist or what. When in fact the National Socialists imported lots of foreign labor, particularly from Poland and Ukraine. They were big into using Slavic Gastarbeiter to replace German workers who had gone to the front to fight against the Soviet Union.
yeah. Well, I mean, I was thinking about that because, like, if you think of like I was saying about the Buchanan Brigade, right back in the '90s when Pat Buchanan was coming out, or he got big. Um, it's kind of the same platform. And the funny part about that was that essentially, if you think of Cesar Chavez and that kind of let's say that kind of sympathies or sentimentalities, right? That is essentially what in what is basically would be right wing, quote unquote, right? In that context of for family, for land, and what we would consider, generally speaking, to be normal, right? And normally right wing. Um, and so, in a sense, what I was saying is that you may not have like an explicit um, explicit understanding of like workers' rights as we think of like explicitly in terms of like in socialism, or like communist ideological talking point, but it's something like that exists in America. And that's something like that is you can see that in the like in Pat Buchanan's, the Buchanan Brigade, because what you're saying, as far as like what a counter right might look like, is really that, except having some kind of official backing, right, or some kind of a
Well, having some
um,
organization, which it doesn't at all at this point.
well, yeah, I
I
mean the
mean,
closest
look,
you
look,
had
look.
was Buchanan.
I am a member of a labor union, and I was a member of one in my previous job. But the fact is, these unions are not. Right, Jim Hoffa and George Meany and Cesar Chavez are all dead. Right, we don't have any labor leaders of that type of ability anymore.
Yeah. um Yeah, but I mean, I'm not saying explicitly in terms of like a workers' union or anything like that, but more so like that kind of a mindset, right? That kind of a value system is still there, right? Whether that they get expressed in fact like gets kind of expressed as something like the Trump phenomena, or like the Buchanan Brigade, or San Francis, middle American
Well,
radicals or
yeah,
something
well, I
like
think
that, right?
Francis is probably the analyst to start with on here. So, but I mean, and I pointed out in the thing I wrote, I mentioned Francis as the middle radical. We're not talking about people moving from being radicalized workers that are members of a socialist or communist party and joining a fascist or a national socialist party. We're talking about people that before they became radicals were completely apolitical or very moderate, like completely centrist and middle of the road.
Yeah, and that's the so what I'm saying is that same kind of I guess like value system or whatever I'm trying to come up with a word that is not necessarily like politicized, but it exists.
Weltanschauung,
Yeah, whatever that is. I mean, everyone says that. I don't really know what
worldview.
it means, but it's German. That's all I know. But yeah, well, what I was saying is that thing that exists. It doesn't express itself in explicit political terms, right? Because that kind of political term or
Right, but this
overall
is the
ideological
problem.
base
Then you have
doesn't work here.
this large group of people that don't have any political representation because there's no organization organizing them to represent their political interests.
Yep, the closest that you have is basically Trump. But I mean, I do think that
Yeah, but that wasn't very well organized. That was kind of basically, guy arrives at the top and gets
it's a personality cult.
spontaneous support from below. But look at how very different that presidential campaign in the U.S. was from the 10 years between 23 and 33. It took the National Socialists in Germany to get just a third of the Reichstag and get Hitler appointed chancellor.
Yeah.
And there wasn't 10 years of steady increase from zero to one third the Congress of a right wing party that made an effort to include workers and lower middle class and former middle class as well as richer people as part of its platform.
Yeah. Partially, that's the thing is that the way America has developed. I mean, it never really. Um,
Right, which
like I
is
said, I
why
mean,
people like Adam Tooze say that the United States can't have fascism or national socialism as understood historically, because none of the conditions that existed in Europe have existed in the U.S. ever.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, so that's basically something like though. Like when we think of like what could be possible, like I thought about in terms of a potential like counter to what the system has or the system is. You have something like the Trump phenomenon. Trump is real. It's just that the guy, it's a personality cult. It's a personality driven movement. You could say the same thing somewhat with Pat Buchanan, but there was something really there, right? Uh, Not to mention the fact that he was definitely influenced by San Francis. Some of his even the guys who were writing, like the advisors were like, San Francis. He was on it too. But I think that something close to that would be something like that, like or like the original America First. And ironically, it kind of looks like something like you would see in maybe South America, right? Some of these like Mexican nationalist types of um, outfits. Like they have different kind of like local like like the local like each area of
Right. I mean,
Mexico
Latin
usually.
America does have some right wing syndicalist movements historically, where they tried to adapt ideas coming out of Spain under Franco and Italy under Mussolini to their own local conditions.
Yeah, and it kind of like I was talking to you one time like about about cartels and stuff like that where there's more to it than just cartels. Like they're criminals, yeah, but there's more to it than that. I think a lot of these things, like the cartel are essentially local, if you will, like expressions of their like own like paramilitary groups, right? They defend the local turf. It is in fact almost like their own little government. But there's more to it where um, that same kind of mind, the same kind of sentimentality, the same kind of the stuff that's driving them is similar to the stuff that's like driving y- I guess sympathies against the state or sympathies against American global homo, whatever, right? What I mean by that is like I'm trying to, man, I'm like right now like kind of lightheaded, but in many ways, like the the feeling that you get from like if you have been following them, like different cartels, they are yeah, I'm sure to make their money through killing or running drugs and whatnot. But they originally most of them formed because they're defending the turf, like from other cartels, right? And partially because they're
Yeah,
very
but the
local,
reason I find this not to be very helpful is that you're not going to have a great society and state structure if it's based upon
well,
growing
I'm
and
not
selling
no
narcotics.
I'm not saying that. That's not my point. Let me just finish.
No, but I mean, a better example of something that where you could see positivity might be something like Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Yes, I'm talking about like though there's something to the way that uh, s- different communities have developed in South America or Latin America, right? That runs has a lot of commonality the way that it could also run in North America. I mean that's because due to geographical constraints and there's a similar kind of developments among the people, right? People coming from other parts of the world coming, so there's a lot of parallels. I don't know a lot, but there's quite a bit of parallels where I think you will see some kind of a convergence, with like things that has happened in South America, like the way, um, you know, move away from being looking outward as an empire because American empire is declining as we speak to something that looks internal, right? Um, and so in that case, something like maybe you can think of also. I mean, I have this thought before. The Trump phenomena is something like that in the same vein, where people are trying to switch away from the outside, right, being outward looking to inward looking. It's the same kind of um, I don't know, zeitgeist, if you will. So that's what I was saying. I mean, my example of cartel is kind of a bad example, but I was trying to
Yeah,
come up with the, but I mean, I'm fascinated with that was for whatever, but
and also don't think it applies to the white working class.
it doesn't.
The cartels apply to people. Uh, I mean, we're basically. Uh,
White working class is local, right? There's a that's why it uh,
yes, but I
the
mean, and in some sense, drug dealers are successful in the cartels. These are just another version of merchants.
yeah, but the thing is that yeah, that may be so, but even if you look at the biggest cartel, they actually basically feed quote let's feed their local, the community, whatever.
Yeah, but
Most of
that's
them
been
are.
done by criminal organizations before too. I mean, the mafia in Sicily was notorious for this type of uh, support to its local community in places like Palermo.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that that's like optimum, but there is it is what it is, right? Given the circumstances, and if you think about it, is it better that my town be taken over by other town and and our town being used as the base, like drug user base, or rather like our town makes drugs and gets rich and I give it to someone else's town. I'm just saying at a most base level, you know um, base level of analysis, like if you're that base, I'm just saying from that perspective it kind of makes sense. I mean, that may not be again a good
It seems
example.
like a descent into warlordism for some.
Well, yeah, it is, but what I'm saying though is that that's not a good
I get
example.
that it's a successful form of parallelism in that in very large parts of Latin America, including Mexico, they have essentially uh, created autonomous zones through creating paramilitary organizations to protect their turf from other cartels.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that that's the optimum whatever. I'm just saying that that's just
Yeah,
a
I
bad
mean, you
example
have to
though.
have a
But
really bad government in the center for that to even be a possibility. So, I mean, yeah, it happens in Mexico because the government in Ciudad de Mexico is too weak to be able to exert control over large portions of its territory.
yeah, yeah, but again, I mean, again, my example may have been kind of like, let's say, not up to not to the flavor of many people, but that same kind of a thing though. Sorry, the same kind of the same dynamic though. I think is present. Um, you have basically criminals that get to the top and be able to take advantage of it, but I do
Well,
think
I
that
mean,
just like
one theory, I mean, going back to Hobbes and Leviathan, is that the governments are created when finally a territory has only one criminal organization, and it takes formal power and becomes the state.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you the one of the other aspect of it is that it's regional, right? So if you look at Mexico, if it's not really like a town owns access to the business, right? It's more like a regional thing, and so each of the region, once they're taken up by like different cartel types, right? Different, basically, let's say families or groups. Most of the wars that happen is among them. Like most of the brutality that you see.
Yeah, but there's a lot of collateral damage. So you get innocent people killed in Juarez all the time because there's cartel violence against other cartels.
Yes, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, look at America. I mean, if it's
I'm
even
not saying we're a exemplar here,
let's move
but
away from the.
I'm not seeing the cartels of Mexico as a model that would get us out of our problems.
Well, let's just move away. Okay, I'm being autistic there. I'm trying to like let's move away from the cartel example. That's my fascination. How about that?
All right,
Uh,
but
but
I know
what I'm
lots
saying,
of people from Chihuahua, and they don't have anything good to say about the cartel based in Juarez.
yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, war is just actually bad.
Yeah, but
Um,
that's where the cartel in Chihuahua is based because it's at the border into El Paso, where they can control the flow of fentanyl and other narcotic coming into the U.S.
well, I mean, it's a trade center, so the thing is,
Right,
you're gonna have.
and there's a huge difference. The capital of the state, Chihuahua City itself, is infinitely lower crime, better place to live than Juarez.
Yeah, the primary reason why, because that's where a lot of these things gonna go down, right? And that's where you're gonna see higher activity. But I mean, and again, let's just forget the whole cartel thing. That's just my fascination, I guess. But my point though is that that kind of local, how should I say, like a local locus of power, right? Local foci exists in
A
America, and that's,
warlord.
well, not warlord. I'm just
They
saying
pretty much are. These are
you could.
guys
I'm,
guys that
I'm
are in conflict with each other over the right to sell narcotics. But I mean, as you
no,
noted,
no,
they're basically miniature wars between their paramilitaries that the central government in Mexico City can't crush.
no. I know. I'm not talking about that. What I'm saying though is that the same kind of inward looking, you know, where we start to think away from like, okay, running like let's say volunteering for the army and going to Iraq, right? Like instead of thinking like that, basically what I'm saying is that a convergence in the way that a state has developed in or society has developed in South America or Latin America, right? And something like that might happen in North America, and that's basically what I was saying. What I don't know what my thought process.
Okay,
I can't go
I
back to
don't
what I
think
was thinking
that it
before.
is possible that that happens certainly, but I don't think it's a good development if we go the way of northern Mexico.
Yeah. Uh. Yeah. So I don't know, man. That's really it. I don't want to hang on too much because I also got things to do tomorrow. So yeah, I made like all my email Twitter accounts got nuked because it came from the same IP.
Yeah, you were saying bad things about Ukrainians, weren't you?
Yeah, I was under there. I was in quite a few people been um, snitching my account because I've said bad things about them. So I said bad things about them, about women, about a certain ethnic group. By the end of it, but then I was like picking up a lot of viewers, or like not viewers, a lot of subs, and yeah. But it's still Ukrainians that fucked me over. So
Yeah, they were the ones that got me suspended too, because I was opposed to nuclear war on their behalf.
yeah. Well, if you're on a list, check if you're on a list. If you are, then yeah, they're like watching you.
I don't think I'm on any list. I checked, but I'll check again.
Yeah. So it was like okay, I got two bans for like 2 weeks. And then the last one, I don't even know like what the reason was, and I couldn't get in my email because the email that account is with is I get so many emails, I forgot my passwords. I'm like, fuck it, whatever. I'll just make a new account. So all my Twitter account, um, coming from the same IP, all of them got nuked. So I'll probably open up a Twitter account, something different next time. But I'm kind of enjoying it. Twitter is not really done. It's not really made well. Like I go there, right? Even though I'm not on their account, I can see other people. I've
Yeah.
been joined people in their spaces. I just can comment. That's it.
All right. So I'm gonna wrap this up soon because I gotta be at work at 5, and it's now 9.
Yeah, man. I also got some shit to do here. So
But thanks for coming on, and I still don't think there's any. I mean, if somebody can come up with a solution, but I think uh, I don't think there's going to be a successful movement uh, in opposition to the actual state. It's just gonna. I mean, the best they're gonna have is the Republicans, like instead of going 3 steps to the left, go only 2.5 steps.
yeah, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. But I do think that this only happens once the empire starts to kind of collapse. If not necessarily collapse, but where there's an overt understanding of like everyone understands that yeah, it's on the downside. I mean that's already apparent right now, but it hasn't happened to the point where they have lost something that's like really, really important, like really vital, like basically like let's say um, the petrodollar or the dollar, regime, or let's say if whenever Ukraine thing wraps up, that's going to be another game changer, right? So I think this is going to be like one of those things. This will happen over a period of time, but the focus from looking outside will kind of change to looking inside, and that happens once essentially people are not willing by when like the status or the esteem of the empire kind of goes down, kind of goes down the toilet. Well, and it's not America's not everywhere anymore. I think that is sooner rather than later. I mean, like I was saying, like I don't know, whenever last time I was here, like I think I said like how I thought all the stuff that we're seeing now would have happened like 2030s. It's like holy shit, it's happening now. So uh, like we're going through some big changes. So who knows? Maybe your this might come about sooner than later. But I think yeah, shit's like things are happening so fast. You know, it's hard hard to say even what to talk about because like there's like a million things to talk about.
All right. Yeah, I'll see everybody later. I gotta get to work tomorrow at 5 and clean toilets and take out garbage, but I'll be done by the afternoon. So, all right. Adios, everybody. Vaya con Dios.
Cool. See ya. Thanks. See
All
ya,
right.
Autumn.